at the time, 62, 63, it was quite factionalised. There were people. Sometimes it wasn't necessarily vicious, but for instance, Bob went to 3 versions of the folk scene. He came to the King and Queen, which was our lot. He went down to the Roundhouse in Wardour Street, which is where Alexis Corner and Cyril Davis had a blues club, and he went to the Singers Club, which was Ewan McColl and Peggy Seeger's club, and all of us were pretty left wing. But Ewan and Peg were very, very left-wing. Basically, it was CP. The British folk scene had started up as a reflection of the American folk scene, which was very union-driven. But the British trade unions would have very little to do with it, apart from one or two individual unions. The National Union of Mine Workers were very interested. But others weren't. TUC weren't remotely interested. They just wanted to find out how many communists were there, And I was, as the son of a politician. I mean, the only time my dad ever got embarrassed, he actually asked me, because he worked at one time for the TUC, and when he asked me the question, he was no longer working for them, and he asked me the question, and I looked at him, and he went red, and he backed off. They were basically doing a Reds under the beds thing. Which was I just find sickening. But it is true to say that that they were very prescriptive, CP, very prescriptive about what was okay and what was not. And although electricity hadn't come into it then, they believed that when you wrote songs you had to name names, always name names. And if you didn't name names, then you were a chicken shit, and you weren't an interesting writer, and they didn't like him. Everybody disagreed. We all went to each other's clubs, but we all had different ideas about the way it should be done. In more recent years, we've actually sort of come to realise that some of us, that there's, for heaven's sake, we're all actually after the same thing. Why are we fighting? And that's delightful, and we can actually get on with each other and watch each other perform and admire the good bits and wonder about the bad bits. But that's what performing is. You're trying to get better all the time. That's what music is. It never stops, as far as I'm concerned, never stops being interesting, never stops. You never stop learning. He was a visitor. I mean, visitors were welcome. It didn't matter. He did very well in our club. He did really well at the Troubadour. I think he did pretty well at the at the Roundhouse. He did fairly well at the Singers Club, but there were those who felt he was a bit of an interloper. Woody Guthrie is very much an icon, and this is the man who's touted as the heir to Woody Guthrie, and he doesn't name names. John Foster Dulles had been the previous Secretary of State, and Eisenhower had been the previous president, and Adenauer was still the Chancellor of Germany. So these were names that had to be pointed at. Macmillan was still Prime Minister. He had to point at him. And sometimes he did get pointed at, but it wasn't as a matter of course. Bob didn't write songs like that anyway. It's not the kind of stuff he wrote. When he wrote a song like Oxford Town, it was basically painting you a picture of what's going on. He wasn't saying there were these people called X, Y and Z who were beaten up by, police officer, trooper so-and-so. He didn't do that. But he painted you a picture of what it was like to be in Oxford Town in the southern states. I don't know. Phil Oakes is the one who did the opposite, and he named names all the time. And he was a smashing bloke. But I think actually there's room for everybody. So I don't want to say that Phil Oakes is wrong because I like the way Bob Dylan works. I think Bob would have limited himself had he done that, because he would have been going against the grain. But I do think there's room for everybody.